Now then, settle in with your tea, because I've got rather a tale for you. It's about weddings, photographs, and the peculiar ways our children choose to express their affection. At my daughter's wedding, she hung my photograph at the entrance with the caption, "No entry." Charming, really. Nothing says loving tribute to dear old dad quite like being turned into a human scarecrow for your own child's nuptials. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now, because nothing says family bonding quite like crowdsourcing your global audience whilst your offspring plots your demise. A cruel blow, you might say, from the only child who was supposed to be my pride and joy. Instead of celebrating, I turned round and walked away, leaving behind my dreams of a happy family gathering. But 3 hours later, my phone exploded with 73 missed calls. Her betrayal had turned into rather spectacular chaos, as these things often do. You know how it is when you're settled in for a quiet evening. There I was, ensconced in my favorite leather armchair with a newspaper and a proper cup of coffee, when technology decided to intrude. The harsh blue glow of my mobile sliced through the warm amber of my reading lamp like a particularly aggressive sort of sword. January evenings in Brooklyn have their own rhythm, you see, and I'd carefully orchestrated mine around the simple pleasures of newsprint and caffeine. The phone buzzed against the leather armrest with all the subtlety of an angry wasp. My reading glasses caught the aggressive light as I fumbled for the blasted thing, and there was Eva's face, exploding across the screen with the sort of radiant excitement that can only mean trouble or engagement. Possibly both. "Dad," she announced, practically vibrating with joy. "I have incredible news. I'm engaged." My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips, rather like those moments in films when time stops and you realize everything's about to change. Behind her, I caught glimpses of what appeared to be an expensive apartment, marble countertops, floor-to-ceiling windows revealing San Francisco's glittering skyline, the sort of place where the rent alone could fund a small nation's defense budget. "Sweetheart, I started, but she thrust her left hand toward the camera with the enthusiasm of someone who'd just discovered fire. The diamond caught every light source in her apartment, throwing rainbow fragments across her flushed cheeks like a disco ball having a nervous breakdown. "Look at this ring, Dad. Isn't it gorgeous?" Before I could muster a properly paternal response, a man's face appeared beside hers. Tall, sharp jawline, perfectly styled dark hair. His smile belonged in a toothpaste advert, the sort where everyone's unnaturally delighted about their dental hygiene. "Mr. Rice," he said, his voice carrying that smooth confidence I'd learned to distrust during my days in real estate. Rather like honey over broken glass. "I'm Harold Kensington. I promise your daughter will be the happiest woman in the world." Now, I've heard that promise before, usually from door-to-door salesmen and politicians. But there was something about Harold's delivery that made me want to count my fingers after shaking his hand. "Dad, I'm so happy," Eva gushed, practically bouncing in place. "Tell me about Harold." "He's a successful cryptocurrency investor, Dad," she explained, her voice carrying that particular breathlessness of someone who's been thoroughly impressed by financial jargon. "He has such ambitious plans. Harold's portfolio includes blockchain startups, NFT ventures." "Markets have been volatile lately," Harold interrupted smoothly, his hand sliding to rest on Eva's shoulder. The gesture struck me as rather possessive, like a cat marking territory. But I've diversified across multiple sectors. Tech, renewable energy, some traditional stocks for stability. I noticed his eyes never quite met mine through the camera. They darted to something off-screen, perhaps another device, perhaps checking the time. His expensive-looking watch caught the light, but the way he positioned his wrist seemed deliberate, almost performative. Rather like an actor making sure the audience notices his costume jewelry. "When's the wedding?" I asked, though I suspected the answer wouldn't please me. "March 15th. Eva squealed with the sort of delight usually reserved for lottery winners. "I know it's soon, but Harold found this amazing venue that had a last-minute cancellation. The Fairmont, San Francisco. Can you believe it? 2 months. They were planning to marry in 2 months. I've known people who take longer to choose wallpaper." "That's quite fast," I said carefully, employing the sort of diplomatic understatement that could diffuse international incidents. Harold's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, the way plastic does when you apply too much heat. "When you know, sir. Plus, Eva deserves the wedding of her dreams, and this venue won't wait." Through the screen, I watched him absently twist a gold ring on his pinky finger, a nervous habit that contradicted his polished exterior rather like a crack in expensive porcelain. His other hand remained firmly planted on Eva's shoulder, thumb moving in small circles that seemed more controlling than comforting. "Harold's been so thoughtful about everything," Eva gushed, leaning into him like a flower toward sunlight. "He's handling all the vendors, the arrangements. I barely have to worry about anything." That should have made me happy, shouldn't it? Instead, something cold settled in my stomach like a stone dropping into still water. After more excited chatter about flowers and catering, the sort of conversation that makes fathers realize their daughters have grown up when they weren't paying attention, they finally rang off. I sat in my leather chair as darkness crept back into the room, my phone's glow fading to black. The newspaper lay forgotten on the floor, and my coffee had gone cold. Something about Harold bothered me, though I couldn't quite name what. Perhaps it was the way he dominated the conversation while seeming deferential, or how his expensive clothes looked just slightly wrong. Too new, too perfect, like a costume rather than a wardrobe. I stared at my reflection in the black screen, watching my own doubts multiply in the darkness. 18 days of restless nights had passed since that video call, each one bringing fresh worries and unanswered questions. When Harold phoned asking for a man-to-man conversation, I'd agreed, partly from curiosity, partly from an unshakable need to understand what was troubling me about him. The cafe in Manhattan's Upper East Side was exactly the sort of place I'd expected Harold to choose. Understated wealth, marble tables, the sort of discretion that comes with 50-pound entrees. Rather like a gentleman's club for people who actually have money instead of just pretending to. I spotted him in a corner booth, somehow managing to look nervous despite his perfectly pressed navy suit. It was rather like watching a snake attempt to appear friendly. "Mr. Rice, thank you for coming," he said, standing to shake my hand. His grip was firm but slightly damp, always a telling sign. "Please, sit. Can I order you something?" "Coffee's fine," I replied, studying his face as we settled across from each other. In person, the polished charm seemed more fragile, like expensive veneer over cheap wood. "How are the wedding preparations going?" I asked, though something told me this wasn't really about table settings and flower arrangements. "Wonderful. Actually, that's part of why I wanted to speak with you." He fidgeted with his coffee cup, rotating it precisely 90 degrees, as if proper alignment might solve whatever problem he was about to reveal. "Can I trust you with something confidential?" The question hung between us like a trap waiting to spring. In my experience, anyone who begins a conversation by asking if they can trust you is usually about to explain why you shouldn't trust them. "Of course," I said, though every instinct was screaming otherwise. Harold leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "My investments are temporarily frozen due to market conditions. Nothing serious. Regulatory review of one of my crypto funds should resolve within 6 months. But..." He paused, letting out what sounded suspiciously like a practiced sigh. "Eva dreams of a fairy tale wedding, and I can't bear to disappoint her." I watched his eyes as he spoke. They focused on a point just over my left shoulder, never making direct contact, rather like a politician explaining why taxes need to rise. "The venue requires full payment upfront," he continued. "Flowers, catering, everything. It's more than I can liquidate right now without taking massive losses on my frozen assets." "How much do you need, Harold?" "50,000 would cover everything. I'll return every cent by year's end, I promise. With interest, of course." He reached into his jacket and pulled out what appeared to be official documents. "These show my portfolio value, over $2 million in assets, just temporarily inaccessible." The papers looked legitimate, full of official seals and legal language I didn't understand. But something about the way he'd produced them so smoothly, like a magician revealing a planted card, made my skin crawl. "Mr. Rice, I know how this must sound, but I love your daughter more than anything in this world. I just want to give her the perfect beginning to our life together." He was good, I had to admit. The vulnerability seemed genuine, the documentation convincing, and £50,000, while significant, wouldn't devastate my retirement savings. Still, something nagged at me. Perhaps it was the way his story was just a bit too perfect, like a well-rehearsed performance. "All right," I heard myself saying, though part of me was already regretting it. "But Eva must never know about this." Absolutely, Harold replied, relief flooding his features so quickly it almost looked genuine. It would crush her to think I couldn't provide for her properly. I wrote the check with deliberate slowness, my hand hesitating above the signature line. Harold's eyes tracked every movement of my pen like a hawk watching prey. The moment I tore the check free, he practically lunged across the table to take it, folding it carefully into his wallet with the reverence of someone handling the crown jewels. You won't regret this, Mr. Rice. Eva is going to have the most beautiful wedding San Francisco has ever seen. He left immediately after that, citing urgent calls with vendors. I sat alone in the expensive cafe, watching my coffee grow cold whilst affluent New Yorkers chatted around me about market trends and holiday homes. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. Any rational person would have done some basic checking before handing over £50,000 to a virtual stranger. Instead, I finished my coffee and headed home, carrying the weight of a secret that already felt like a mistake. 6 days had crawled by since that cafe meeting, each one heavier than the last. I moved through my Brooklyn apartment like a ghost haunting his own afterlife. The cordless phone was never far from my hand, though I wasn't entirely sure who I was hoping would call. Every safest seemed to mock me. The clean kitchen where I barely ate, the living room where I couldn't concentrate on reading, the bedroom where sleep came in fragments. Margaret's photograph watched me from the nightstand, a gentle smile frozen in happier times. I picked up the silver frame, running my thumb across the glass. Margaret always said truth is more important than comfort, I whispered to her image. She'd have known what to do. Margaret never trusted smooth talkers, never let charm override her instincts. When Eva was 16 and wanted to date that boy with the motorcycle, Margaret had done a background check that would have impressed Scotland Yard. But Margaret was gone, and I was making decisions that felt like betrayals of everything she'd taught me about protecting our daughter. The phone buzzed in my other hand. Eva's contact photo smiled up at me. She'd inherited her mother's intuitive eyes, the same eyes that were now clouded by love and trust in a man who might be lying about everything. "Dad, perfect timing," she said when I answered. "I just got back from the florist. How are the wedding preparations going?" "Wonderful, Dad. Harold is so attentive to details. He's handling everything, the band, the photographer, even coordinating with the hotel staff. I barely have to think about anything except showing up in my dress." Every enthusiastic word felt like a small knife twist. Harold was controlling every aspect of their wedding with my money. "Eva," I started, then stopped. The promise I'd made to Harold felt like chains around my tongue. "Are you sure you know Harold well enough?" "Of course, Dad. Why do you ask?" Her voice shifted, becoming slightly defensive. "Just parental worries. You've only known him a few months." "6 months, actually. And when you meet the right person, time doesn't matter the same way." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "You taught me to trust my instincts, remember? Well, my instincts tell me Harold is perfect for me." Perfect. The word echoed in my mind like a warning bell. In my experience, nothing is perfect, especially not people who claim to be. After we rang off, I sat at my kitchen table and pulled out the leather journal Margaret had given me years ago. Most of the pages remained blank. I'd never been much for writing down thoughts. Tonight felt different. February 9th, 2025. I wrote, "Gave Harold $50,000 for wedding expenses. Eva doesn't know. Something feels wrong, but I made a promise. Margaret would say I'm being a fool, but sometimes being a good father means trusting your daughter's choices, even when they terrify you." I closed the journal and returned it to the drawer. Outside my window, Brooklyn hummed with evening life, couples walking home from dinner, families heading to late films, the comfortable rhythm of ordinary people living ordinary lives. For the first time in decades, I envied them their simple problems. The wedding was 5 weeks away. 5 weeks for Harold to prove my suspicions wrong, or for me to discover just how badly I'd misjudged the man who wanted to marry my daughter. 3 days had passed since I'd written those words in Margaret's journal. Now I stood outside Le Bernardin, San Francisco's temple to French cuisine, watching through floor-to-ceiling windows as Harold and Eva laughed over champagne flutes. The morning flight from JFK had left me jet-lagged and hollow-eyed, but I'd managed to shower and put on my best suit, a navy Brooks Brothers that suddenly felt rather cheap under the restaurant's crystal chandeliers. "Dad." Eva bounced toward me in a flowing emerald dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Her engagement ring caught every light in the room as she wrapped me in a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and happiness. Harold rose slowly from their corner table, his movements calculated and predatory. The suit he wore, charcoal wool with subtle pinstripes, looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. My 50,000 had been put to good use, apparently. "Mr. Rice, so wonderful to see you again." His handshake lingered too long, his thumb pressing against my knuckles with unnecessary force. "Please sit." Harold gestured to the chair across from them, but somehow positioned himself so he commanded the best view of the dining room, rather like a general surveying a battlefield. "I took the liberty of ordering wine," he said, not bothering to consult me. "A Chassagne Montrachet that pairs beautifully with their seafood." Before I could respond, he was signaling the sommelier, launching into a detailed discussion about tannins and oak aging that left me feeling like a tourist in my own daughter's life. "The menu changes seasonally," Harold continued, not bothering to hand me the leather-bound folder. "But I recommend the John Dory, unless you prefer something more traditional." The word traditional dripped with condescension, rather like honey laced with arsenic. "Dad's actually quite adventurous," Eva said, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "Remember when you tried that sushi place in Chinatown?" "Mr. Rice, do you still use a checkbook?" Harold asked suddenly, his smile never wavering. How wonderfully authentic. I felt my jaw tighten. Sometimes the old ways work best. Of course. Though I imagine keeping track of expenses must be challenging without digital banking." He leaned back in his chair, one arm draped possessively around Eva's shoulders. "Eva, your father probably remembers when Bitcoin cost pennies. Don't you, say?" The evening continued in this vein, Harold making subtle digs whilst Eva giggled like some sort of accomplice. When the bill arrived, Harold made a grand show of producing a Black American Express card, waving away my attempt to contribute with magnanimous dismissal. "Please, Mr. Rice, this is my treat. After all," his eyes met mine with calculated cruelty, "I can certainly afford it." That night, sleep proved impossible. I lay in my generic hotel bed until 11:30, replaying every smack, every calculated insult, every moment Harold had made me feel small in front of my own daughter. Finally, I gave up and moved to the cramped desk, still wearing my wrinkled dinner shirt. I opened my laptop and stared at the search bar, unsure where to begin. "Harold Kensington," I typed. The first page showed LinkedIn profiles and tech blog mentions, all consistent with his story. Too consistent, perhaps. I scrolled deeper, adding San Francisco to narrow the results. Page 3 yielded something different, a business registration for Kensington Digital Ventures filed just 6 months ago. The address was a UPS store. Then I tried Harold Kensington fraud. The screen flickered, then filled with court documents. Los Angeles County Superior Court. Case number CV 2024-7891. Harold James Kensington, defendant in a civil lawsuit for misappropriation of funds, identity theft, and investment fraud. I searched deeper. More cases emerged. Rebecca Martinez, £95,000. Sarah Chen, nearly 200,000. Jennifer Walsh, over 230,000. Always the same pattern. Young, successful women. Always the same promises of investment opportunities. Always the same devastating losses. The photo gallery made my blood freeze. Harold with Rebecca at what looked like an engagement party. Harold with Sarah at a romantic dinner. Harold with Jennifer, her left hand prominently displaying a diamond ring identical to Eva's. I spent the next 4 hours printing everything. Court filings, news articles, victim testimonies, police reports. Each document revealed fresh horrors. Harold had used at least 3 different surnames: Kensington, Morrison, and Richards. He specialized in targeting women through dating apps, crafting elaborate personas as a successful entrepreneur. The engagement phase lasted exactly 6 months, just long enough to build trust and access bank accounts. By 5 o'clock in the morning, the evidence covered every surface of my hotel room. Photos of Harold's previous victims, screenshots of fraudulent investment documents, testimonies from devastated families. Dawn crept through the hotel curtains as I stacked the evidence in chronological order. My phone showed 7:15. Eva would be getting ready for work soon, probably humming wedding songs whilst Harold watched from their bed, planning his next move. Valentine's Day morning brought crystal-clear California sunshine streaming through my hotel window. The irony wasn't lost on me as I arranged Harold's criminal history across the desk like playing cards in a deadly game. I dialed Eva's number at precisely 7:15, knowing she'd be awake but Harold might still be in the shower. "Morning, Dad. Did you sleep well? Wasn't dinner amazing?" The happiness in her voice made what I had to do even more brutal. "Eva, I need to tell you something important. Are you sitting down?" "I'm getting ready for work, but what's wrong? You sound serious." I held Rebecca Martinez's court filing in my free hand, drawing strength from another father's failed attempt to save his daughter. "Eva, Harold asked me for $50,000 for the wedding. You told me he was a millionaire." Silence stretched across the phone line like a taut wire. "You're lying. Harold would have told me." "Sweetheart, he said his assets were frozen and he needed money for the venue. He made me promise not to tell you." "That's impossible. Harold shows me his investment accounts all the time. He has over $2 million. He has a court case for fraud. Sweetheart, I have the documents right here. Los Angeles County, case number CV 2024-7891. He stole money from a woman named Rebecca Martinez." I heard movement in the background, Harold's voice asking what was wrong. Eva's breathing became rapid and shallow. "You're making this up because you can't accept that I've grown up. You can't stand that I don't need you anymore." The phone changed hands abruptly. Harold's smooth voice replaced my daughter's tears. "Mr. Rice, I understand you're concerned, but these accusations are completely false. I was cleared of all charges in Los Angeles. The case is still pending, Harold. I have the current filings. You have outdated information from disgruntled former business partners. Eva knows the truth about my finances." In the background, I could hear my daughter sobbing. Harold's voice became softer, more manipulative. "Sweetheart, your father is trying to sabotage our happiness. Some parents can't let go. Let me talk to Eva. She's too upset right now. These false accusations have really hurt her." Eva's voice cut through, shrill with pain and anger. "How could you do this to me? How could you lie about Harold just to ruin my wedding?" "I'm not lying. There are photos of him with other women, engagement rings identical to yours." "Enough. You can't accept that I found someone who loves me for who I am, not who you want me to be." The line went dead. I sat staring at my phone screen, the evidence scattered around me like the remains of a relationship 28 years in the making. 1 month had crawled by since that Valentine's Day phone call. 31 days of wandering through my Brooklyn apartment like a ghost haunting his own afterlife. The evidence folders sat untouched on my kitchen table, their manila surfaces now warped from coffee rings and sleepless nights. Every morning began the same way, checking my phone for messages that never came, staring at Eva's contact photo until my eyes watered. Margaret's photograph watched me from the mantel as I pulled out Harold's court documents for the 100th time. Perhaps I'd been too hasty, too suspicious. The internet could lie, couldn't it? Photos could be manipulated, court records misinterpreted. Maybe I was just a jealous father unable to accept his daughter's independence. Today was different, though. Today was March 14th, and tomorrow my daughter would marry Harold Kensington with or without my blessing. I lifted Margaret's silver frame, tracing her smile with my thumb. "Margaret, what would you do?" Her gentle eyes seemed to whisper what I needed to hear. Sometimes love means letting go. By noon, I'd made my decision. I would attend the wedding, offer my blessing, and try to rebuild what I'd broken with my accusations. After all, what father easily hands his daughter to another man? The expensive jewelry shop on Fifth Avenue welcomed me like an old friend. I'd bought Margaret's engagement ring there 30 years ago. The wedding gift I selected cost more than most people's cars. A vintage Cartier necklace with diamonds that caught light like captured stars. At JFK Airport, I sat with the gift carefully balanced on my lap, rehearsing the apology speech I'd memorized during the flight to San Francisco. I would tell Eva I'd been wrong, that Harold seemed like a good man, that I only wanted her happiness. The Fairmont San Francisco rose before me like a wedding cake made of marble and crystal, its facade draped in elegant banners announcing the Rice Kensington celebration. I stepped from the taxi, clutching Eva's gift, my heart hammering against my ribs. Wedding guests flowed through the hotel's entrance in streams of silk and laughter. their voices mixing with the gentle sound of a string quartet warming up somewhere inside. I recognized a few faces: Eva's college roommate, my brother Frank from Boston, neighbors from our old house in Queens. Then I saw it. My own face stared back at me from an ornate easel beside the entrance doors, blown up to poster size in professional black and white. Beneath my photograph, elegant calligraphy spelled out words that hit me like physical blows. Entry forbidden, Giles Rice, by request of the bride and groom. The wedding gift slipped from my suddenly nerveless fingers. Other guests slowed their approach, reading the sign with uncomfortable curiosity before hurrying past. A few shot me sympathetic glances, recognizing the man in the photograph standing frozen on the pavement. "Excuse me, sir, but you're not expected here." The security guard materialized beside me, his voice professional but not unkind. His name tag read Martinez. Perhaps he had daughters too. "This is my daughter getting married." The words came out strangled, barely audible above the hotel's ambient noise. Martinez shifted uncomfortably, his hand resting gently on my elbow. "I'm very sorry, but I have clear instructions." The couple was quite specific about this arrangement. Through the glass doors, I could see the reception hall being prepared. White roses cascading from crystal stands, tables set with china that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My 50,000 at Wyke, creating beauty I was forbidden to witness. I set the Cartier box carefully beside my own photograph, the ivory silk wrapping bright against the hotel's polished marble. The diamonds inside would catch the light beautifully on Eva's throat, whenever she chose to open it. "Now I understand, Harold," I whispered. "Now I understand everything." This wasn't just rejection. It was calculated humiliation designed to strip away every shred of dignity I might have salvaged from our relationship. Harold hadn't simply won Eva. He'd made sure I would be publicly marked as the father too toxic to attend his own daughter's wedding. The taxi deposited me outside Chase Bank's downtown San Francisco branch at exactly 4:30. Inside, Saturday's skeleton crew moved with the languid efficiency of people counting hours until closing time. I approached the customer service desk with the same methodical calm I'd once used to close million-pound real estate deals. "Good afternoon. How can I help you today?" asked the young banker. Her name tag read Jessica. "I need to cancel a check immediately," I said, placing my driver's license and account documentation on her polished counter with deliberate precision. "Certainly, say. Can you provide the check number and amount?" "Check number 2847, £50,000 made out to Harold Kensington." I spelled the surname carefully, watching her type each letter. "Sir, if the check has already been submitted for payment, this could create problems for the recipient." Her voice carried the cautious tone of someone who dealt with angry spouses and business disputes. I met her eyes steadily. "That's exactly what I'm hoping for." Understanding flickered across her features. She'd seen this scenario before. Betrayed business partners, cheating spouses, family feuds that ended in financial warfare. "The stop payment is now active, Mr. Rice. Here's your confirmation number and receipt." I folded the receipt carefully and placed it in my wallet, right next to the photograph of Eva from her college graduation. Somewhere across the city, Harold was probably reviewing final wedding details, confident that his vendors would be paid, that his elaborate deception would conclude successfully. But in a few hours, when the caterers demanded payment and the florists wanted to settle their accounts, Harold would discover that his primary funding source had evaporated. 2 hours later, I sat in my hotel room watching the city lights twinkle like scattered diamonds. My phone began buzzing, Harold's number, over and over again, each call more desperate than the last. The voicemails told the story I'd orchestrated but couldn't witness firsthand. Harold's first message, recorded at 7:15, still carried traces of his practiced confidence. "Mr. Rice, there seems to be a technical issue with the banking systems." By message 15, the mask was slipping. "Sir, I need you to contact the bank immediately. This is extremely urgent." Message 37 revealed panic. "Please, Mr. Rice, the wedding is falling apart. There's been some terrible mistake." Background noise revealed the chaos, vendors arguing, guests murmuring, the hollow echo of a ballroom being systematically stripped of its magic. Message 68 changed everything. Instead of Harold's frantic pleading, I heard Eva's voice, broken and small. "Dad, please come back." Harold confessed everything. The 74th call came at 23 minutes to 10. This time I answered. Dad. Eva's voice was barely a whisper. Everything. What exactly did he tell you? About the money, about his debts, about the other women. Each word came out like broken glass. You were right about everything. 3 months later, summer heat shimmered off Brooklyn's pavements as I heard familiar footsteps climbing the stairs to my apartment. Through the peephole, I saw Eva standing in the hallway with 2 worn suitcases, her face gaunt but determined. Dad, forgive me. You were right about everything. The words tumbled out as she collapsed into my arms, the same way she had when she was 7 and fell off a bicycle. He took almost everything, she said, her voice shaking with exhaustion and shame. My house, savings, even grandmother's jewelry. After the wedding fell apart, he became desperate, started forging my signature, accessing accounts I didn't even know he'd found. The television murmured in the background. I'd been watching the evening news out of habit. Suddenly, Harold's face filled the screen, but not the polished headshot from his fake business profiles. This was a mugshot, his hair disheveled, his practiced smile replaced by the hollow stare of someone whose schemes had finally caught up with him. Harold Kensington arrested for fraud, the anchor announced with professional detachment. Federal investigators say he targeted wealthy families through romantic relationships, stealing over $2 million from victims across multiple states. Eva looked up at the screen, then back at me. I'm not his only victim, am I? Rebecca Martinez, Sarah Chen, Jennifer Walsh. I named the women whose photographs I printed in that San Francisco hotel room months ago. You weren't his first, but you'll be his last. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with its familiar evening rhythm, normal families finishing dinner, helping children with homework, living the simple, honest lives I'd envied during my darkest moments. What now? Eva asked. I looked around the apartment that had sheltered me through the worst crisis of my life, then at my daughter, older, wiser, scarred but not broken. Now a rebuild together. Margaret's photograph seemed to smile approvingly from the mantel. Sometimes protecting the people you love means making difficult choices, even when they hate you for it. But love endures, truth prevails, and justice, when it finally comes, tastes sweeter than any revenge. Rather like a proper cup of tea after a very long, very difficult day.